Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Uncovering the Hidden Curriculum of Grad School During a Pandemic. It's a webinar we're holding today for our incoming graduate students. We're joined today by a panel of experts, including our Associate Deans for UC Davis Graduate Studies, as well as a number of students. I'm Elizabeth Lambert. I'm the Director of Communications for UC Davis Graduate Studies. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator for the day, and that's Associate Dean of Graduate Students and Postdoctoral Scholars, Hartigan-O'Connor.
Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to have you here. Just as a reminder, we have
Before we get started, I'm going to add a few details about the Zoom webinar. As you may have noticed, your videos are not appearing. You see the videos of our panelists today. You are also muted. This is a webinar format. So you might be wondering, well, how are you going to communicate with panelists? If you notice on the bottom toolbar of the window, you'll see a Q&A feature. And in that feature, you can add your questions. If you're familiar with systems like Reddit, if you see a question that you like or that you'd like to see the answer to, you can upvote it. If you also want to add additional details, you'll be able to comment. And we'll also be able to give you comments from the experts within graduate studies and link you directly to resources that we have on campus. So now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Ellen Hartigan-O'Connor. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone. I'm just going to kind of orient you a little bit here, talk about our agenda, talk about who we are, talk about who you are, and then we'll get into our discussion, and we should have some good conversation about starting graduate school. So we'll start with introductions. Then we want to develop a couple of ideas to frame our discussion this morning. The first is this idea of a hidden curriculum, the idea of when you're coming to graduate school, there are expectations that you will know very clearly, and there will be expectations that people will kind of think you already know that you may or may not, depending on your background. We're going to talk a little bit about that idea, and the idea that you're here to start building a career, right? You may be here for 2 years, you may be here for 9 years, but what we're going to start today is the beginning of the then decades after that. So we want to introduce that idea, and we want to talk about strengthening your network, which is an essential part of kind of navigating graduate school. We're then going to switch and talk about common challenges of starting out at graduate school, then specific COVID challenges, which add an extra twist to some of the typical challenges of starting out in grad school. And then we're going to end on a note of ideas about what to do next, so that you leave here feeling like you have a good knowledge of things that you need to investigate and some practical advice on what you can do to navigate those. There'll be several periods for questions and answers. There'll be several periods for poll too. We're using a polling feature so that we can get a little feedback from you, even though we cannot see your faces. So let me start by asking the panelists to introduce themselves. You already know me. Duncan?
Hi, I'm Duncan Temple-Lang. I'm a professor in statistics, and I'm also the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs.
Jillian?
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Jillian Moise. I'm a 6th-year PhD candidate in the sociology program, and I'm also the incoming graduate student advisor to the Dean of Graduate Studies and the Chancellor of the university.
Kristen?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kristen, and I am a 4th-year PhD student in the Nutritional Biology graduate program.
And Megan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Zillian, and I am a 2nd-year PhD student in the geology program.
And each of our backgrounds and experiences and fields is going to shape the way that we answer questions today. So we want to encourage you to think about where you stand as well. And here's where you are. This is information we drew from your registration for this event, split between incoming PhD and incoming master's students. 30% are international, and so maybe joining us from different parts of Davis or close. 2/3 are women. 1/3 have come from smaller liberal arts and community college backgrounds, and 2/3 from larger universities. And this is obviously going to shape the way you're thinking about graduate school, your familiarity with graduate programs and what graduate students do from day to day. A third are coming from the University of California, and so maybe more familiar with UC pace of life, pace of academia, and your ages range from 20 into your 60s. So we've got a lot of experiences and life situations to uncover as we discuss today. So as I mentioned, I want to introduce this idea of the hidden curriculum of unspoken expectations. All of you have attended or are attending orientations that will provide you with really valuable information about clear expectations. What do I need to do to get this degree? What courses am I supposed to take? Where am I supposed to show up to be a TA? Where do I sign in to get my protective equipment? But there are also a whole host of kind of unspoken expectations that people tend to pick up over time. But the pace of picking up these unspoken expectations can really vary depending on your background and your personality and your positionality. And so we wanted to kind of highlight these because sometimes it's best to make the unspoken spoken so you know what you're dealing with. So there are unspoken expectations that you'll know how to interact with faculty. How do you address people? How do you write someone an email that'll come across as thoughtful and yet, you know, not too forward? These kind of unspoken expectations. There's the unspoken expectation that you'll take initiative and show that you're taking initiative. So there's a social quality to coursework, particularly seminars or research work, that may be new for some of you, depending on kind of your backgrounds. An unspoken expectation that you'll get feedback from peers before and in addition to faculty on your writing. So you'll have other drafts. You'll create writing groups. You'll be working on your research and writing outside of the classroom and outside of supervision, as well as when you're working with a faculty supervisor. This one was a surprise to me, that you'll seek out sources of money to support your research. So I'm a historian, and when I discovered that to go to an archive, I would have to find an archive that would give me money in order to write a research paper, I was very surprised. I learned how to do it, but it's good to know in advance because if you find out, 2 weeks before you're going to the archive, that's going to be a really tough situation. So if you know in advance, you can prepare in advance. And kind of overall, the unspoken expectation that this is all natural, that you'll just adapt from an undergrad mentality to a grad mentality. And I think it's that unspoken expectation that leads, people who have been in it a long time, maybe not to let you know and to call your attention to these ideas of how do you start building a long-term career. So you've heard enough from me. I want to take it to our grad students and see, kind of how did they make that shift? What do they think is most important? What do they wish they knew then, what they know now? I'd just like to hear from any of them to talk a little bit about this idea. And please just jump in as you wish.
Hi, I'd like to speak a little bit to the last bullet point about adapting from an undergrad mentality to a graduate mentality. So I received my undergrad from the small liberal arts school, kind of that we mentioned on the previous slide, and as a result of that, I also hadn't been exposed to graduate school life because there weren't graduate students at that university. And so, yeah, that one was a big one for me. And I think if I could give myself a piece of advice that I wish I had known when I was first starting graduate school is that there is an adaptation period. And I think just if I had given myself more time and maybe not judged myself in that transition and just kind of given myself the space to make the transition, it might have gone a little bit more smoothly, and realizing that it may just take some time. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to my experiences as well. So my experience was a little bit different from what Kristen just described, in the sense that I had spent a little bit of time outside of undergrad before returning to a PhD program. And so I had quite a bit of years in kind of the professional field before coming into graduate school. And so I was able to draw from some of that in kind of figuring out how to interact with faculty and that kind of thing, because I had interacted with professionals, supervisors before. And so if you do have some of that experience, know that you can draw from that as well. So I did have that on the one hand, but on the other hand, I also found that the PhD experience is also very unique in many ways. And so though I had completed a master's prior to coming into the PhD program, I found that there was still so much to learn that was specific to that experience. And that there was a culture to adapt to, really. And so for me, it just kind of took time to adapt to that culture. And just kind of learning along the way. And we'll talk about some of these, I think, as we go on in the presentation, but drawing from peers, interacting with students who are maybe further along in the program. I know that for sociology, we have a pro seminar where we discuss some of these things. I don't know the degree to which all departments and disciplines have something along those lines. But even though we had a pro seminar where we talked about navigating graduate school, initially, sometimes it still didn't click until we actually reached that particular stage. And so that was something that I found fascinating. So I was introduced to these ideas, but they didn't really hit home until I got to that stage. And then I was able to draw from that and pull from that information that I was exposed to early on. So that I just wanted to add that.
I apologize because there's some background noise, but I understand that there's both master's students and PhD students or incoming of both. And so I just want to speak a little bit to some of the different expectations around those as well. So for a lot of master's students, your project might be a little bit more outlined and you might expect a bit more guidance, and you might have a more specific idea of what your timeline looks like. Whereas with incoming PhDs, there's sort of this expectation that you're really coming up with these questions by yourself, and this is entirely your own ideas. And so depending which you're doing right now, you might feel a lot of difference in terms of that. Another thing that I found a bit tricky to wrap my head around, and I guess I'm still working on a bit, being an earlier grad student, is that there's a bit of this unspoken expectation that you're putting your research first, and yet the social dynamics around your classes and how you're participating and how you're expected to go above and beyond. You are expected in some ways to go above and beyond and yet still be prioritizing your research. And so sometimes figuring out that balance of how do I behave in a way that's very engaged and building relationships with the people that are teaching me these classes, while still also prioritizing my research. And so again, just having some grace with yourself as you sort of figure out what that looks like for you.
Yeah, I think that that's a terrific point, and that you all have spoken to the idea of, and I like your phrasing of having some grace with yourself, recognizing that the tension or the friction that you're feeling doesn't mean you're doing it wrong necessarily. It means that this is what the adjustment is like, and it takes some time. And specifically to your point about that you need to keep your research a key priority, even if that's not what you're doing day to day, or if it's in addition to what you're doing day to day in classes, is something that's quite new. Keeping the independent and the structured moving simultaneously is a big challenge. So I want to pick up on something that all of our grad students made mention of, and that's this idea of asking people, right? Of talking to people and building multiple networks. And this is an idea that's really crucial, not only to navigating your first quarter in grad school, your time in grad school, but the entire rest of your career is about creating multiple connections with people for different kinds of advice, for different kinds of support, for different kinds of information. So there's you, we have a nice little graphic here, there's you at the center, right? And you may have already talked with or met with your graduate coordinator, who's a staff person in your program who has a lot of details about how to fill out the forms and get registered, and kind of helping you with the nitty-gritty of entering a program. And that person will continue to be an essential support to you on all kinds of questions. You'll also, I hope, either in a pro seminar or in orientations or social events, start meeting students in your cohort. And they can be a real check for you on, what have you learned, right? I mean, you can share with each other kind of this information that you found out, as well as, a check that others are in the same boat, and that your feelings are part of a larger whole. Kristen referred to the idea of graduate students are more advanced than you, and how important that can be. They've been there. They do, I'm sure, have ideas about, oh, I wish I had known, or, oh, yeah, they say this is how to do it, but here's another way how to do it. That kind of information can be really helpful. We in grad studies, Duncan and I, of course, are always available. You can email us if you are coming into roadblocks in your program, or you just or have concerns. There's also a large staff at Graduate Studies who are here to help you. We're going to talk today a little bit about on-campus resources, and that's the people, the offices, the institutions, the fellowship programs, the food pantries, all of the folks and places you can go to get additional kinds of support for daily life, as well as for your academic life. And then your major professor, so the person who's guiding your research as well. So let's get into some of the challenges, and this is where we're going to start talking about how to put this all into practice. So as we've referred to a couple times, starting graduate school is always challenging. And when the group of us were talking earlier, we tried to pull out some of the things that were kind of challenges that we hadn't expected, or challenges that we wanted to make sure folks thought about a little bit as they were starting out. The fast pace of the quarter system as opposed to a semester. The idea of imposter syndrome, which is the feeling that you don't belong, that somehow you've been admitted by mistake. This is very widespread. So the University of California is surely not admitting all of you by mistake. You all belong here. And yet this is a very real feeling, right? Learning the structure of what is a faculty member versus a staff person versus a postdoc versus a graduate student, and then the culture as well. Creating a new community. So many of you have moved here or are creating communities wherever you are. How do you do that? How do you build that network that we were just talking about in terms of kind of support community? Getting oriented to those resources that I referred to. And then also kind of figuring out these expectations. And this speaks to Megan's last point. Expectations about how you come across in seminar, getting good grades, and then the going above and beyond, and what that means. And I think her point is really expert. And then also what counts as good grades, which can be very different actually in graduate school than undergraduate, and that's an adjustment too. So we're going to do a poll here of all of you participating. Which one do you want us to talk about first? What interests you the most, so that we can help focus our time in our conversation? Oh, okay. Expectations beyond good grades is number one. And then we've got adjusting to the quarter system, resources, and support community. Okay, well, let's start with going above and beyond. And Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about that, since that was something that you spoke to, I think, really helpfully?
I can. I'm sorry. There's this awful droning noise.
We can't hear it then.
Yeah, I think this is also where sort of who you are and your personality, like who you are in terms of identity, and also your personality comes into this too. Because a lot of times you have these courses that are sort of no longer just information being thrown at you, and you're more so reading the literature and discussing things. And so there's a bit of an expectation that you're reading the literature, you're understanding a good portion of it, and you're coming with questions that go beyond what the information that was presented to you. So, in undergrad, when I had seminars and we were reading papers, it was more just sort of, you were reading them and understanding them, and then somebody was leading a discussion and they were sort of coming up with the questions, whereas you sort of transition in grad school to you are the one coming up with the questions and thinking really critically about the literature that's presented to you and thinking about, you know, what do these studies not consider, and just really building off of whatever is already existing in the field. And so I think that what I spoke to before about that sort of conflicting with what was going on with research is you're in some ways expected to do more with class work while also prioritizing research. But I think this also comes down to the structure of the courses. So you're spending your time reading, but it's the way that you allocate your time is you have to sort of spend some time reading, but then going back through those papers, you're going back through whatever it is that you were looking at and really coming up with questions that you're then bringing into the classroom. I hope that's helpful.
No, it really is. And do you or does anyone on the panel have ideas about how to get yourself to do that? How to figure out what kinds of questions to bring to something? Is it through trial and error or hearing what other folks say in a seminar or say in a lab meeting? Or how did you learn how to approach the material you were reading from this critical and also understanding kind of a broader field approach? Kristen?
Yeah, I can take a little bit of a stab. So I think kind of on this idea of going broader is, and what questions to take is from this broad perspective and like, what is the end goal? And maybe in undergrad or in previous class experiences where you may have wanted to have an immersive learning experience, but perhaps the goal kind of ended at that class. Whereas now in your master's and your PhD program, this is kind of like a training for your whole career and a training with the end goal of becoming a professional in the area. And so maybe when you're deciding something as granular as like what questions to ask from a paper or things like that, it's, you know, how does it relate to your personal research and where you're taking your career? But I guess I want to think about it in terms of the endpoint of this training for a career versus maybe like an endpoint of a good grade type of thing, and how that affects you.
Yeah, so that the endpoint isn't the end of the quarter when you see your, you see your grades and then you move on and you put all this in the past, because it's all going to build on each other. So how should graduate students think about grades?
I think personally, I think if you feel like you're trying your best, you know, not to get too caught up in the letter grade or things like that, but if you're seeking out additional help and you need additional help, if you feel like when you ask yourself if you're putting in hard, diligent work on the class, and the answer is yes, then hopefully the grade kind of comes. And if it's not, seeking extra help kind of goes to the initiative from the previous slides.
Duncan, you're giving people grades in graduate school. What do you think?
I am, and this is a really hard, your first year. So what everyone has said is so wonderful, and it applies to your second year in some cases and your first year in other programs. Some programs, the grades are very important in your first year because we have preliminary exams. So for some, like in my field, we tend to, this is a reasonably smooth transition from undergraduate because it's their regular courses where we throw material at you just to make sure that you have the foundations. So why it's so hard for you guys now is that you've got to actually pay attention, exactly as Megan was saying, you got to pay attention to aspiring to research, taking care of your grades, learning about a whole lot of new things. So make sure that your grades are good enough so that nobody's going to say you're not making the grade. But don't worry about the actual A+ or the A. Just do your best and make sure the reason in almost all programs that we make you take courses is so that you have the fundamentals later on. makes it so you are built. It is not the end of the quarter. I'm done. I can forget about that. You are building on those for the rest of your life.
Does anyone want to talk about, connect this to the fast pace of the quarter system? So this comes as a shock to many people. I know that a good number of the folks on this webinar come from the UC system, so maybe they've come from a campus that has quarters, but does anyone want to talk about what that's like and how do you cope? It's 10 weeks.
I can speak to that a little bit. From my previous experiences, both at the master's level and at the undergraduate level, I came from a semester-based system, so it definitely was difficult adjusting to the quarter system. But I can say fast forward now, having spent time in the quarter-based system, I actually kind of prefer it, and it's what I've become accustomed to. But in terms of adjusting, I think it's just a matter of thinking about, okay, you work with the semester-based system, and I actually had recent experience with that because I interned for the Faculty Diversity Internship Program with Los Rios Community College. So I actually sat in a semester-based program, so I was able to see, kind of compare side by side. But you have a little bit of time with the semester-based system to kind of ease into the class a little bit, whereas you don't have that with the quarter. I mean, you literally hit the ground running. You kind of have to begin immediately. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that there really isn't that kind of introductory time, so to speak. So with readings and that kind of thing, a lot of times professors will send out syllabi ahead of time. I would definitely suggest kind of getting, looking through that syllabi and knowing what it is that you're going to have to do for the course of the quarter. And then for your own pacing, kind of break it down in terms of what you think you need to do on a week by week basis, because there will be weekly work, and particularly with the readings. I found that the coursework was pretty reading heavy, which it should be. And so thinking about, for the way that you work and for the way that you adjust, how are you going to break down those readings to ensure that you're going to be prepared on a weekly basis?
Yeah, and then just to add, if it is a class that has exams, there may be 2 or 3 exams in a duration of a quarter, which then means about every 3 weeks. And so just kind of knowing that you need to give yourself, the time and the reward to rest after an exam, but realizing that is going to be kind of on the short side, so that you can make sure that you're on top of it and prepared for the next exam, which might be just a few weeks away.
So one of the ways, oh, go ahead, Duncan.
Sorry, a lot of students do actually fall behind in the first quarter. We see this, and we take account of that. There's a very bumpy first quarter. If you do fall behind, go talk to your professor, your instructor, or your graduate advisor. They will give you and just letting them know that this is what happened. Then put a note, and they go, okay, explain this later on. Just talk to people.
Yeah, and to that point, I want to make sure that we also bring in this idea that also had a lot of interest in this group about creating a new community of support for yourself, right? That this, what's going on in the classroom, what's going on in your research is always connected to your ability to have a supportive community. Kristen, do you want to start us off on this topic a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important to begin building this community. And this community, I think, can be composed of lots of people. It can be the incoming students that are also in your cohort, because those will be the people who you might be studying for the exam with, or having study groups with. And so that's one great community. And then another great community are also the students who are upper years in your program. And these people, I think, are such a great resource because they've recently been in your shoes. And so they have that experience to draw from, and they have the advice that they wish that they had known to share with you. And so in my program, there is a peer-to-peer mentoring group that meets weekly. And so I know that those weekly meetings are typically geared towards the first year students. And if this is something that your program has as well, I would definitely recommend utilizing that resource. And if it's not, I would still encourage you to reach out to upper year students, and especially at the beginning of the quarter, in the beginning of the year, I know a lot of graduate programs have events to try to help the new students meet the older students. And so I would just really recommend utilizing those resources at the beginning, because building the community takes a lot of time, but the more interactions you can have, and now that we're probably doing this through the Zoom world, it will probably take a little bit more time than it would in a traditional sense. So rely on that community and start building it.
So is peer-to-peer networking like academic or social or both? I mean, I think that's part of what we're thinking and talking about here too, right?
Yeah, in this one example, I guess it falls a little bit under the professional setting, in that the upper year students typically prepare different, or each meeting has a different topic. So anything from how to talk about TAing, to how to talk to your faculty advisor, to how to make a resume, what's a CV, things like that. But then also benefiting from, once you're interacting, it's a little social as well.
Jillian or Megan, do you want to talk about, I want to make sure that we also touch on non-academic communities that are supportive and kind of have helped you, or you want to kind of talk to folks about or alert them to.
For me, in my own experience, I don't think I had like a formal non-academic community, but as cliche as it sounds, friends and family, are obviously people that you can go to for questions and just, about things that don't necessarily have to do with navigating graduate school. So that was important for me, just kind of maintaining connections to folks for me back home, just because I don't have a lot of friends and family in the state of California, but just, keeping those connections and continuing to talk about the things outside of academia that I'm passionate about as well helps, in an odd kind of way, helps me to also focus on what it is that I have to do in the program. So again, for me, it was mostly informal, I would say.
I think for myself, it's been a bit of a mix. I still keep in touch a lot with people back home and from other communities, but also sometimes when you're taking your courses, you'll meet people and, this is a person that I would like to interact with academically because I like their ideas, but maybe I don't want to interact with them socially. And then you might meet somebody in one of your classes that you're like, oh, this is somebody I would actually like to interact with socially. And so then it's just kind of, trying to develop a rapport with those people that you do sort of gravitate towards, and figuring out a way to do that in a way that's still, I guess, somewhat professional, at least at the very beginning. And then aside from that, sorry, sorry, I'll just come back.
That's fine. Yeah, that's no problem. I think the other thing is that different kinds of communities can give you different kinds of feedback. And I think about this continues throughout your whole career, right? When I submit an article to a journal and I get feedback, to put it nicely, right? And it's very harsh, right? There is one group of people that I would share that information with, and they would help me dissect it and revise the paper. There's another community, my close friends and family, who I go to say, these people are idiots and mean. And they'll say, yes, they're very mean, you're brilliant. And I know that they're just giving emotional support, right? And you need to have both. You need to have the colleagues who will say, they're not just mean. Here are 3 weaknesses in your argument, and you need to go back through and address them. Ignore the fact that your feelings are hurt. And then the community that can say, yeah, your feelings are fair. It's okay to get upset about this, and we love you anyway. And to recognize that those are different groups, right? That you don't necessarily go to your committee or to, in my case, right, my professional colleagues and say, my feelings are hurt. They give this other kind of support to you, and both are really essential to a person navigating through any kind of profession. And many of you who have had other kinds of work experience know this, and it's the same in academia, I would say. Do we want to touch on resources beyond kind of personal connections that have been especially helpful, or you'd like to highlight for incoming graduate students who are new to UC Davis, may not know some of the most helpful?
Yes, I definitely would like to speak to resources. I found that, you know, like I mentioned, I'm in my 6th year, and I found that it's only kind of more recently that I've learned about a lot of the resources that are available to graduate students. And I wish I would have known that information earlier. And, you know, strangely, I actually didn't know about a lot of these resources until in some respects I was responsible for them in my various GSR positions. But there's a wealth of resources I found at UC Davis, and there's a number of ways to actually learn about these. And when I say resources, you know, we've talked about, of course, other people as resources, other graduate students, faculty members, but there are also lots of centers and offices in UC Davis that offer really tangible and concrete resources to graduate students that a lot of times even faculty in your own departments may not be aware of. And so some of the best ways that I found to learn about these resources is to first to speak to as many people as possible. Graduate students that may be outside of your program in your department, people who are GSRs, which are graduate student researchers for these particular centers, and also browsing the graduate studies website. There's a lot of information there. I would even just kind of take an hour or so to go through the website, follow the links, and you will find a lot of information that may not be helpful right now, but you can file some of them away for a future a point in your program. So some of the ones specifically that I can think about, Ellen mentioned some of the challenges or expectations rather, hidden expectations, one of which was feedback from peers on writing. So the university writing program, for instance, has specific resources specifically for graduate students. They have university writing program consultations. So these are one-on-one consultations with other graduate students who will actually look at your work and give you feedback on your work. And that's their job to do so. So it's not like you feel kind of uncomfortable asking someone. And then also there's a writing partners program. So there's a program that you can sign up for where you are actually paired with another writer, and you can give your, if you want to work with someone who's in your department, or if you want to work with someone outside of your department, you have the opportunity to actually present that information in your application. Also, we talked about the importance of peer-to-peer mentoring. There are established peer-to-peer mentoring programs that a lot of students are not aware of, and some of them are newer, so that's part of the reason why folks may not be as aware. But my predecessor, the outgoing graduate student advisor to the dean and chancellor, actually started a first-generation mentoring program where graduate students who are first gen are paired with other graduate students who are further along in their program to assist with navigating these things that we've been talking about so far. In my previous role as the GSR for the Cross Cultural Center, I oversaw the graduate students of color mentoring program. So there are these formal mentoring programs, and those are just a couple of examples. And I know that individual departments have similar kinds of programs, but the benefit of those is that you have people who are coordinating these programs. They're doing a lot of the legwork. So, you know, not everyone may feel comfortable reaching out to a student who's further along and asking for their assistance. And that's something that may come with time. But if you're more comfortable kind of having someone do that legwork for you and do the matching and pairing process for you, there are these programs that you can sign up for that can assist with that process. So, you know, like I said, those are just some examples. There are many resources out there, and I know graduate students have expressed sometimes frustration in not knowing how to navigate those resources. So again, I would say start with looking at the grad studies website, and having informal conversations and with folks who may be more familiar with what's out there.
Christian or Megan, are there particular centers or resources you want to make sure folks know about, ones that have been you've heard are really effective or you've experienced or your colleagues know about?
I think Jillian did a really great job speaking to all of those resources. One other one that I know has been really useful for me is along the lines of analyzing data. So, you know, as researchers, we generate a lot of data and then you have to answer your question. And sometimes I was like, I don't know how to do that. So there are actually lots of really great data science type initiatives and places for you to go to on campus to learn programs like R, or to get support in other types of coding adventures that you might find yourself on. And so the data science initiative, there's Meet and Analyze Data. So when you get to that aspect of your research and it comes down to analyzing it and answering the questions that you set out to answer, there are places for you to get help in that process as well.
Is there anything we forgot, Megan?
No, I think that covered most of it. I mean, it's just finding resources for whatever sort of type of community that you're trying to build. And again, this just comes down to a lot of who you are and what your identity is. I think the other thing that I would add, being an international student, is that sometimes your department doesn't have the answers. A lot of times your department doesn't have the answers. So for me, going to like the International Student Center and talking to people there was really, really helpful. And in some cases, even that was a bit tricky. Being Canadian, there's like a very weird relationship between Canada and the US, where like, yeah, you don't necessarily need the same things as somebody coming from China or somebody coming from somewhere in Europe. And so knowing that the International Student Center is also sometimes a little bit skewed in what they have information on. So I actually found that using like academic Twitter and just kind of tweeting out to the world and trying to find other Canadian academics was super helpful. And they, in a lot of cases, were actually able to give me even more information than the International Student Office or my department.
Yeah, that's such a great point, that we now have all these virtual communities too. And so that it's not just going to a place. And now you have it encourages us to reach out to the whole world, right? To get good ideas. Well, I want to make sure that we cover anything that's coming in over the Q&A. Elizabeth, is there anything that we haven't covered that we should?
Great questions coming in. And thank you to our panelists. Some of them have already started answering them in the Q&A itself, but I thought some of them might foster some additional discussion. So let's start with this one from Charlie. For adaptation from an undergrad mentality to a grad mentality, is there anything of note that you can remember from your transition period that was helpful or that maybe you learned from? Any tips for adapting or things to think about or remember?
As you cast your mind back, folks, think about that very first month in grad school, when you're first stepping in.
One of the important things is the answer is not in the back of the book. Oftentimes we don't know the answer, and that's what makes it interesting. So that's a huge change.
That's kind of a philosophical shift from an undergraduate to a graduate mentality, right? There may not be an answer.
And that's what excites professors, is that there isn't an answer, and so you got to be curious.
I think some of what this speaks to is a whole-scale shift in your identity. And so for a lot of people coming into graduate studies, your identity as a student thus far has maybe been, oh, I'm somebody who gets really good grades, or I'm somebody, whatever that may be. And this is going to sound intimidating, but let me explain. The skill set that got you here is not necessarily going to be the skill set that you need to graduate, right? And that's why you have this time to do this degree. but understanding that you're now shifting from somebody who got to where you are in large part because of your grades, and now understanding that that part has to shrink a lot as you move forward, and pivoting into your identity as a researcher and what that means. And that's going to take some time, and it really encompasses everything we've discussed here and so much more. And so try not to be intimidated by that, but also pay attention to that internal resistance that you feel, because that internal resistance is really about this identity shift that everyone is going through as they enter into grad school.
Kristen and Julian, did you feel that identity shift? You're coming in, you're at the top of your game, and then it's a different game, it turns out.
Totally. The identity shift resonates really hard or really strongly with me. In undergrad, I played a sport, and so I identified really strongly as I'm a tennis player who makes good grades and likes to do art. And that shift definitely had to occur because in graduate life, that wasn't going to be the way that helped me graduate. And so I think it's been slow, and it's actually taken probably all 3 years of graduate school so far. And I'm sure it will just continue to grow that way, where now I see myself as I'm a scientist, and I also like to be active and draw on the side. But now formally, in the view of my kind of like career work life, I see myself as a scientist, which is definitely something that just needed time and probably many small victories in between when I started graduate school and now, to say, yes, I can do this, and this is how I see myself, and I like it. Yeah, so I really like that idea of the identity shift, and the idea that there's going to be some internal resistance along the way, and that's okay.
For me, one of the things that I have struggled with and actually continue to struggle with actually is kind of like the professionalization aspect of graduate school. And I think that, Kristen and Megan spoke to this a little bit, but just that I'm someone that wanted to kind of come to school to like study and pick apart ideas and have intellectual discussion, and that happens, but there's also a professionalization process that also happens as well, that you might not be thinking about as you go into graduate school, that you are preparing to enter into a career. And so kind of shifting from just thinking about this would be like a fun academic and stimulating experience, which it is, but then also that you are becoming a person who's, again, entering into a particular field, and all of that comes with that. I think that's what I maybe struggle the most in adjusting to graduate school at this level.
That's so helpful. And I think also the message to everyone listening is that you're not alone in feeling that this is a transition, and you don't have to figure it out tomorrow. That it takes a quarter, a year, 2 years, 3 years, the rest of your career, you continue to kind of grow into a new identity, which is exciting, but also can be unnerving. Is there something else, Elizabeth, that we can cover?
So this next one is from a master's student. For master's students, it seems much of our short time at Davis may be conducted remotely. How can we maximize our graduate experience, including building strong connections with faculty during this time?
That's not only perfect, it's our next major topic. These same challenges now through the veil of working remotely. So yeah, let's get ahead of ourselves. Does anyone want to speak to the issue of connection, right? Creating, I mean, this is our first one, right? We all agree this is really important. Strong connections with faculty, when you can't just drop by, right? You can't bump into them and then transition into a conversation. What do you advise? How do you translate some of those same skills to the remote?
I would think in terms of making those relationships with the faculty in your first or second year while you're still taking lots of classes, that attending those office hours and the places where you'll get to have more one-on-one connection with the faculty will probably be even more valuable than they were in pre-coronavirus times. And so I would recommend utilizing those. And then I'd also just want to bring up the point that graduate school classes are a little unique in that they're oftentimes pretty small. And so even just making sure that you're coming extra prepared to class so that you can engage when you have those classes and be a student who uses the Zoom features, the comment box and the things like that in class to work at making the relationship with the faculty during their graduate class as well.
So how might a master's student use office hours in a way that's different from the way an undergraduate student would use office hours? So we now know they're all online. So you're going to Zoom in. And can anyone speak a little bit to that? Because it is a little different. I mean, your reasons for being there and kind of the way you approach it might be a little different.
I would think that maybe one difference would be you might attend office hours instead of to get help on a specific homework problem. You might be attending office hours for more of a broad conceptual question. And so I think if you can maybe broaden the reason why you're going or show extra initiative with an additional question outside of maybe a homework problem set, if it is that reason why that's bringing you there, I think maybe those would be two places.
I think maybe what this points to at a little bit of a deeper level is that at least I, as an undergrad, sometimes felt like if I didn't have super specific questions at office hours, that I was like wasting somebody's time. And that's just totally not true. People have these office hours that are set aside and they're specifically there to talk to you. And as grad students, sometimes we don't like get to talk to other people about our research as much. So, I mean, you can show up to office hours and just be like, hey, I think your research is cool. Can I talk to you about it? And we will talk your ear off about our research and we will love every second of it. And so knowing that you don't have to, have specific questions, you can show up and just be like, hey, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, I want to talk to you about it. And it also, if you can do that with faculty and if faculty have office hours, that's wonderful, but you can also do this with grad students. Like I taught a course over the summer and I had students that would consistently come to office hours and be like, hey, actually, could you just look over my resume for me? Or could you help me draft an email to this person? Or can I talk to you about your research? And that was wonderful. It was great because also everybody's also just at home by themselves right now, right? Human interaction is lovely. So never underestimate the wonderfulness of you just coming and talking to people about whatever it is that you're interested in and that you have questions about.
And I think a key part of that is that it's not limited just to the faculty that you're taking courses with, that you can also email someone and say, I love your research. Do you have office hours or a lab group that I could come and talk to you or participate in? That kind of cold calling someone is, when it's about shared ideas and research, it's welcome and it's fine. That you don't have to be limited. Maybe in the same way, have any of you tried that?
I haven't tried it on the,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I haven't tried it virtually, although it certainly can work virtually as well. But yes, definitely. There have been professors that I've actually reached out to at other universities whose work I was interested in and emailed them. And you'd be surprised how excited they are to receive an email from a graduate student who's interested in their work. And so oftentimes I find that of course, at UC Davis, outside of your department, I think certainly people would be willing, but even outside of the university, if there's someone whose work you're interested in or has a particular skill set that you like to learn more about, people are very, I think I think that that's another thing to get adjusted to, is that faculty members are often treat graduate students a little bit differently than undergraduate students. You're starting to become more of a colleague, and I think they begin to treat you that way. And so because of that, you're able to access faculty members in ways that maybe you weren't able to at the undergraduate level, because again, it's part of that training experience, that these will eventually be potentially people that are your colleagues. And so there's a training for that. And so I say all that to say, yes, I have had that experience, Ellen, and I would definitely encourage folks to, you know, to try that if there's someone that you'd be, you know, want to talk to outside of your department.
I'll just chime in and say that you can go and talk to people and ask them, what should I do next for my career? What class should I take? How should I strengthen things? And you should ask that of all the faculty in your program and beyond. And that's very, very concrete, but unrelated to your course or your problem set that you're doing. The other thing to do is to say, hey, I'd like to do a project, a side project, some independent study units. I like to do group projects. And this is how you build up your portfolio, but also connect with faculty who then might give you a letter of recommendation when you're moving on to the next step. And that's, so you just try to make opportunities for yourself, and while minimizing the commitment from the faculty. And if they don't reply, try again. If they don't reply, try third time. And if they don't reply, then move on to another faculty member.
Yeah, that's a good way to gauge. The first 3 times they may have gotten lost in their inbox. After that, they're too busy and they won't be supportive of you. Let's go a little bit deeper in the COVID challenge module of our conversation today. So we've already touched on the first one. Some of the other things that we were thinking about in advance of this meeting were the challenges of coping with isolation of pandemic distancing. How do you pick up the informal advice that you would normally get from conversations with another student? How do you attend classes and care for small children or sick family members at the same time? And then how do you adapt when everything's remote? How do you adapt your work style? How do you adapt your projects? And how do you stay motivated? So Elizabeth and Catherine, if we can take a moment to poll the audience on this, then we'll know how to prioritize our time. I think it'll be helpful for us. Okay, connecting faculty, which we talked about, staying motivated while remote, and the informal conversations. Okay, so for the productivity and remote, Jillian, do you want to talk about that? You want to kick us off on that?
Sure. In terms of productivity, so for me, again, because I'm a little bit further along in the program, I haven't actually had an opportunity to experience taking coursework remotely or TAing for that matter remotely. So I can't quite speak to that experience specifically, but I am at the research stage of my program. And I know that for master's students, you all will get there quite soon. And for PhD students, you'll certainly be working towards your research relatively soon as well. But I am currently in the process of data collection through qualitative interviews. And it's been a struggle for me because my plan was to do a lot of my recruitment in person. And right at the time that everything actually started happening with COVID. And so, of course, I had to reevaluate my research and figure out how best to move forward. And I am just generally a person that really likes face-to-face interaction. And so dealing with kind of virtual interaction has been an adaptation period for me and a bit of a struggle because I really like the visual cues that you have from kind of sitting down with a person. And so figuring out how to have that remotely has been a process, but I've also with regard to my interviews specifically, have been able to conduct virtual interviews and reach folks who I wouldn't have been able to through in-person recruitment. So I've, thus far I have interviewed someone in Mississippi and interviewed someone in Pennsylvania. And so that's been pretty fun and kind of like a silver lining, so to speak, with regard to research and having to adapt. And so that's been pretty motivating because I've had conversations with people that are interested in the kinds of things that I'm interested in with regard to my research. And so that's definitely been helpful in that sense. And I think to a degree that can translate over to coursework as well, in terms of figuring out how to interact with people in your cohort, interact with people in your programs in a classroom setting virtually. It may take some time, but I think it also opens up avenues that maybe weren't there before.
And that's kind of unexpected, right? That we assumed it's all bad news, right?
Yeah.
And going to be harder. And I think that's a really interesting example of ways that it can be new and good ways and motivating. Megan, you talked about this a little bit when we were conversing earlier this morning about thinking about the remote setting, remote methods, change the way you thought about or approached your sense of productivity and time. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, and I guess what I would start off by saying is that in graduate school, one of the biggest lessons you learn in your first year is time management and when and how you work most effectively. Because you have a lot more control over your schedule than you might have had as an undergrad, likely so. And I think for me, for example, working at home, I work really well in the mornings, like really anything before 2 p.m., but between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m., I am entirely useless when it comes to work. So for me now, being at home, I can get up early and I can do work. And then from 2 to 4 p.m., I'm doing my laundry and cooking and doing other things. And then when my brain starts functioning again in an academic sense, I can go back and do some work in the evenings. You also have to, of course, balance this with a healthy lifestyle and doing things that you enjoy and that you like. But this is really what works for me, and it works well. And so instead of drinking 3 coffees and almost falling asleep in seminars at 2 p.m., like I was sometimes doing as a grad student on campus, I don't have to do that anymore. So I think that's been really lovely. I think another point, just to really even further emphasize what Jillian said, is the ability to just kind of expand your networks. I've been able to be a part of more conferences because a lot of them are online and free or much discounted compared to what they used to be. And so I think that can be a great way to network. And also, yeah, just being able to reach out to people because everybody is at home and being able to connect with people that are across the country or in a different country is actually, in some ways easier than it used to be.
Yeah, that idea that, it's incredibly motivating to be able to go to a conference or hear a talk that you couldn't because it was in New York, and here you were, and now you can. That's been, a total boon, I think, as well. Go ahead, Kristen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love Megan's point about being able to have the flexibility to kind of rearrange your working schedule to what works best for you. And I really like the point also about maintaining and making sure you're making time for some of your other hobbies and having a set time where you still maintain a work-life balance. I know that when I've talked to some of my peers now that we're all remote and working from our homes, that's been something to adjust to, and people sometimes feel like they're working more than they already were, just as a result of working out of their bedroom or their home office, wherever that might be. And so it's still really important to make sure that you are setting some sort of boundary and having some sort of balance. Otherwise, you probably will filter out, not the expression. Good to have the balance.
Yeah, and so like Megan's idea of the 2 to 4 laundry, cooking, other time is one way to have that balance. Or you can move, I'm leaving this room, I'm going to go into another room to try to mark that. Or I'm now going to go outside, if you can go outside.
Totally.
To try to mark those parts. So the third most popular one, just to make sure we touch on it, is advice. How do you get casual advice when you can't casually run into anyone? You have to deliberately Zoom into them or email them. Has anyone found out something that really works well?
I think so. I mean, everything is happening over Zoom for the most part, but in my department, for instance, a lot of the graduate students will have social events that are not, you know, there's no agenda, they're not planned out, so that you can kind of approximate that sort of casual conversation. And one of the things that I'm recently kind of getting learning is Slack. I actually haven't been on Slack before, but and I think a new graduate students Slack channel was just created. And that does kind of approximate casual conversations. If you look at some of the conversations that people are having on Slack and asking questions, there's a wealth of information there, surprisingly. Actually, you can kind of look at these questions that folks are asking. They may be asking questions that you have. You may, if you're comfortable, post questions on Slack. So that's an opportunity there as well. That's not Zoom, but offers maybe more of a casual opportunity to hear conversations that are happening.
How does Slack work differently from email for those who are new to it?
It's very fast. I find that people respond very quickly. Again, I'm brand new to Slack, but people respond pretty quickly on Slack. And unlike email, for conversations that are not private, you can see them. And so you can see what people are talking about and kind of see the conversation thread. So it's kind of like an instant messenger, so to speak. And if people are on Slack, they tend to, if people are active, I should say, which there's like a green button that that shows when people are active, they tend to respond pretty quickly.
So it has both the messaging and the eavesdropping element, not eavesdropping,
Yes.
but you know, like what are people talking about, yeah. Right? Which I think is gets at this issue of the advice you would pick up informally.
I feel like I would describe it similarly. It's sort of like there are DMs the same way that there would be on Instagram or on Facebook, but then you also have channels that tend to have a lot of different people on them. Some of them are private and some of them are public. And so these are sort of the equivalent of your group chats. And so you might have a group chat that's specifically about papers, or a group chat that's specifically about resources, or a group chat that's just about organizing your lab meetings. And so some of the private ones you would have to ask to join, but other ones, like a lot of the ones in the UC Davis Slack, are just open to the public and you can just go in and join those. So I hope that helps elaborate a bit further.
Terrific.
And it's also good to try to say, to challenge your small group of your cohort. Say, let's each find out something new today, and post it. You know, and it'll die off after a couple of weeks, but you will have learned a bunch of esoteric facts about Davis and things.
I like it. It's like a reverse scavenger hunt kind of thing. Like, go find something and bring it back.
So being intentional.
One thing that my graduate group has begun doing is holding a weekly coffee tea hour. And so it's just a reoccurring Zoom link that never changes. And it was distributed to the whole graduate group. Everyone's always invited, and it's just kind of a drop in, drop out kind of hour. And so that's kind of one place without an agenda that is just defined for you to come in and maybe see people that you would normally see when you're walking down the hallways. And so I really like having that as a resource. And I also really like the idea of not having an agenda, making some spaces agenda free so that you can kind of just have that informal conversation or whatever that ends up being.
Elizabeth, are there things coming in through the Q&A that it would be helpful for us to kind of talk about as a group?
Yes, there were actually a number of questions that were asking about resources related to writing, publishing, and presentation skills. So if any of the students or other panelists would like to talk about what specific resources that they would recommend, that would be fantastic.
So I previously mentioned the university writing program, and so the couple of resources that I mentioned already were the one-on-one consultations with graduate writing fellows, as well as the Writing Partners program. But then also another one that I didn't mention was the graduate student writing retreats that happen. I don't remember how often they happen, but they happen quite often. And these are just blocks of time that graduate students can drop into a writing session that will, obviously happen remotely for the time being, but oftentimes graduate writing fellows are present at these retreats, so that, you can go if you just want quiet writing time and you want to write with other people around as kind of like an accountability measure and motivation. But then too, if you have specific questions, the graduate writing fellows are available to ask those questions. So those are some of the resources that come out of the university writing program.
This isn't maybe a resource per se, but one thing that I've found really useful are on campus, so UC Davis level conferences. So there typically are either symposiums through your own graduate group or smaller conferences that are hosted on campus. And I found that these are a great stepping stone to kind of writing up your research, making a poster or writing a presentation, submitting an abstract, and then having a kind of lower stakes opportunity to practice presenting and speaking professionally and scientifically to an audience that isn't quite as I guess maybe scary as going right out to a big network or a big conference that would be maybe through a larger society. So there are lots of kind of UC Davis level or maybe within your own graduate group level opportunities to have these practices before really going out there into the world.
Another one to quickly mention as well is I know that a lot of paper journals have graduate student editors, and there's some groups of editor groups on campus. So I know, I forget the journal's name off the top of my head, but there was a group in my department that a group of graduate students and lecturers actually who were editing for a particular journal, and actually having that experience editing other people's papers and reviewing. So this is reviewing and editing actually helps you to know what you should do when thinking about your own writing, especially when you're at the stage that you're ready to publish. So the more that you interact with that information and the more that you're part of the process, the better idea that you have in terms of what folks are looking for when it comes to publishing and professional writing.
And it's just always easier to see problems of clarity or anything else in someone else's writing than in your own, where we all tend to believe we're very clear in our writing. And it really helps you to train yourself to specify why something isn't clear in someone else's writing, and then allow you to reflect on your own. Two other kind of centers or institutes that I'd recommend are the Grad Pathways Institute. Is you can find their newsletter, and you can Google them and find their programming. They have a lot of writing groups, writing sessions. So that they focus on professional development for all graduate students. And then Student Health and Counseling Services is also is a good resource for all of us, right? That it has mental health and wellness programming, including, for instance, dissertation support groups and other kinds of writing support groups to get at those kind of emotional and mutual accountability parts of writing, in addition to the technical parts of writing.
So before I get to our next question, we have time for just about two more. I did want to thank some of the panelists and other guests that we have that are answering the questions in the Q&A. Specifically Wallace Woods, who is a senior academic advisor here in graduate studies, and Nicole Rabeau, who is the director of graduate academic programs for the College of Biological Sciences. I see your answers and they're so helpful, so thank you. Here's a question. I'm a bit nervous about being efficient with research as a new PhD student coming straight from undergrad. I'm afraid that with COVID, it will be harder to ask questions and get help in a swift manner. Any advice?
One piece of advice that I have, particularly for your first year and research, is that I think it's easy to fall into this feeling that you have to get going right away with your research project, and you need to have it defined, and you need to start, get into the lab and start generating data and things like that. And I think in reality, for many students, you could probably almost disregard all of the research that happens in the first year, and it probably isn't making it into the dissertation. And so I think it's easy to feel that feeling and have that kind of anxious, am I falling behind already type of feeling. But just to reassure you that, you're not going to fall behind in your first year in terms of a research regard. So, yeah.
It might help too, if you're having that feeling, other than to take some consolation, is just to talk to your professor, talk to the person that you're doing research with, and ask, by the end of this quarter, what should I have accomplished? Should I have already drafted an article? And they'll say no, right? By the end of this year, what do you expect of a first-year graduate student? Do you expect a draft of something? Do you expect a certain number of experiments or a certain number of reviews to have written? I mean, they'll tell you. And they may not have articulated in their own mind. And so it might not have occurred to them to kind of lay out, I expect X, Y, and Z. But if you say to them, I really want to get off to a good start, I want to be clear and keep myself on track, what are your expectations for this quarter, this year? And then anytime you meet with a faculty member, to reassure yourself and to kind of stay on top of this, I always advise students to write a follow-up email. Thanks for meeting with me today. We reviewed our expectations for this year. This quarter, I'm going to do this. This year, I'm going to do that. If I've missed anything, please let me know. And that can help remind you and remind them about this kind of setting expectations. And when you do that, you can also set up meetings. I have found that I'm meeting with my graduate students much more in the remote setting than I did, like formally and intentionally. And I had to shift to set up standing meetings with them in a way that I didn't because I don't run a lab. And so your faculty may be making a shift too, and you can help them by, kind of clarifying expectations and clarifying meetings.
Yeah, I really like those points, because as much as you're learning how to be a good, or learning the relationship between your mentor and your mentee, your mentor is also learning the style that you need to treat you as a good mentee. So it's definitely a two-way street. And so having as many communications as possible will help both of you learn each other's style and learn the boundaries and the tone type things.
I also think a critical point here is what path, if you know what you want to do after you graduate, and how similar that path is to your mentors and how aware they are of mentoring you according to your path. So for example, I have no interest in being a professor. I want to go into policy or science communication. So the opportunities that I'm seeking out and the amount of research that I'm doing and how I allocate my time is very, very different than some of my colleagues who want to be professors. And so if you have that awareness, also when you're thinking about these expectations and talking about them with your mentors, you have to sort of be keeping in mind what path you're on. And I think another important piece of this is how relevant your mentor's path was for you, because a lot of mentors' expectations are based on how they themselves progressed. And so to give you an example, right now, my mentor is, she's a woman and she's younger and she's a professor. And so her path might be more analogous than my master's advisor, who was a man in his 60s who went to Stanford and got his position because the advisor liked his VW van, right? Like very, very different. So when I was talking to him sometimes during my master's about what the expectations were and what I was supposed to be doing, there was a total disconnect between what I felt I was supposed to be doing and what he felt I was supposed to be doing. So just try to keep in mind those sorts of dynamics as you're developing expectations for yourself as well.
Yeah, there can be a generational, there can be a cultural, there can be all kinds of differences between you and your mentors. It doesn't mean that you can't work together, but it does help to know some context. I think that's a great point, Meg.
And as we like to point out, when you have to establish your relationship with your major professor, but you have many other mentors for those extracurricular concepts. So don't limit yourself.
As we take the last question, I just want to put this up as well. This is our kind of what to do next, kind of gleaned from all of the comments that you all have had, things to try, things to investigate, ways to build this kind of support and inquiry. So I'd like to leave this up as maybe, Elizabeth, we have time for one more question.
So I'm seeing, again, a theme in some of the questions. And so this is more of a comment related.
You're ready for academia.
Yeah.
When you show up at an event and say, this is more of a comment than a question, you know you've made it.
So a number of you are asking about where you can get information about the campus response as things change with COVID-19, whether it be your classes being in person or moving online, or your classes moving online and hopefully being in person at one point, or what you need to do if you plan to come to campus for any reason. You're going to find that information on campusready.ucdavis.edu. That's campusready.ucdavis.edu. And on that site, they will have information for students, faculty, employees. There's also a daily symptom survey. So if you're coming to campus, every day you have to take a daily symptom survey. It's a requirement for all UC Davis operated facilities. So that's including the health center, BML, etc. And it will indicate whether you're approved or not approved to come on campus. This site will also have updates about the campus current operations status. So if you have questions about what the remainder of this quarter or what future quarters look like, that's where you're going to check for that information first. So again, that's campusready.ucdavis.edu. If you're looking for more general guidance about the campus response and how it affects graduate education, that's when you might want to check out the graduate studies site. So we have a graduate education guidance page specific to COVID-19. It's grad.ucdavis.edu/COVID-19. So please check that out. We have an FAQ for graduate students that was very carefully and thoughtfully assembled by our staff with contributions from students. We even added some of the questions that came from previous Q&As, and we'll add the questions that came from this Q&A to the FAQ as well.
And that's such a great point. We're in an ever-changing situation, and the advice from 3 months ago can be, and the guidance can be very different from the advice and guidance now. And we're all trying to stay on top of it. So thank you. Those are great places that you all can check.
I noticed a question about sort of classes reverting back to being remote from being in person. At the moment, we have very, 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 very few in-person classes, but those that have very, very carefully constructed safety plans. So we don't actually anticipate them going into remote mode. So assume that they will be in person if they currently are. but we will not be flipping classes to be in person in fall if they're currently remote.
Any last comments from our fantastic graduate student panel? Things that you want to leave this group with as they go forward? We have our suggestions here, what to do next. Is there anything you want to add?
I would like to add one last thing. One thing I didn't mention is other kind of resources outside of within the university. I often like to read the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed. And they often have articles that are specific to the graduate school experience, because what you'll find is there's a culture that's consistent across the university system in the United States at least, and certainly in other places around the world as well. And you can learn a lot about that culture by reading some of these articles. So I think that would be kind of additional reading material that you may be interested in.
I think my final advice is just give yourself some time to make the adjustments and encouragement, believe in yourself, and understanding that everyone's PhD or master's degree is going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. You got this.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any like brilliant last words to give people. Just be kind to yourself. Like, you're starting grad school in a pandemic during a lot of tumultuous politics, to say the least. So just, you know, it's okay if some days feel wholeheartedly overwhelming, and just like know that and be okay with that.
Yeah, you're not alone. You're unique, but you're not alone. Well, thank you so much, panel, folks answering questions, all of you participating. We're incredibly grateful to have you all here. We've talked about different ways to reach out, be in touch. Here's the COVID FAQ. We'll be constantly updating that as well. And good luck, welcome.